A handful of Viet Cong terrorists slipped through the barbed wire perimeter of this U.S. Army convalescent hospital and began throwing explosive satchel charges into the wards with devastating effect. 3 of the hospital buildings, crammed with beds full of American soldiers, many of whom had already been wounded once, were blown apart. Several other wards and the hospital chapel were badly damaged in the explosions and fires which followed. Witnesses said the terrorists seemed to know exactly where to throw their explosives to do the most damage, and security officers suspect the Viet Cong may have had some help from some of the Vietnamese workers inside the compound. As one patient put it, some of these Vietnamese who are putting things back together today may have been the same guys who blew it all up last night.
Well, everybody was just sleeping in my ward. We were all sleeping, and all of a sudden we heard the explosions going off, but the siren hadn't gone off, and it wasn't incoming, because you can tell when the incoming is coming in, and most everybody thought it was outgoing, and we just stayed in bed, and then the next thing we knew, just the whole room was just falling apart on top of us. There were 2 explosions in my ward.
Somebody yelled, "We're taking incoming," and I could hear explosions around the ward, and I stood up, and the next thing I knew, we got hit. The ward got hit.
What happened to you, Ron?
I didn't get the first blast too much, and I saw some guys laying on the floor, and I went up to help them, and they were next to the door. We saw some dinks outside, and they threw another satchel charge in. And
you could see them.
Right, we saw 2 of them out there. They were right on the paved road.
The Viet Cong apparently struck this base in order to make a point about Cam Ranh Bay's vulnerability and to find an easy and accessible target. The fact that the target was a hospital and the victims were sick and wounded men apparently made no difference. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, Cam Ranh Bay.
The U.S. Army's 6th Convalescent Hospital lies at the northern tip of the Cam Ranh Peninsula. The only approach is either from the sea or through a barbed wire perimeter. But somehow the communist guerrillas, called sappers, were able to get inside. Working quickly, they ran through the compound, throwing explosive satchel charges by hand. 11 out of 23 wards were hit. When the confused patients began running outside, they were greeted by rifle fire. 2 patients were killed. At first, the Army reported 99 were wounded, but has since revised the figure downward to 54. The injured were removed to the hospital at Cam Ranh Bay. Military officials at the center refused to talk about security, except to say that guards were on duty in posts around the perimeter. But apparently there were no roving patrols. All of the guerrillas escaped. The day after the attack, some of the patients were asked to stand guard duty. In a classic case of military non-logic, one Army officer said he could not talk about what security precautions were in effect before the attack, because it might give the enemy information about the center's defenses. It would appear the enemy had all the information it needed.
The enemy's intelligence wasn't perfect. Usually there are 38 patients in this building. When the attack came, the building was empty. That was about the only flaw in the enemy plan. The first explosive charge destroyed the water tower, so when the hospital buildings caught fire, there was no water. 3 buildings simply burned to the ground. At least 15 Viet Cong sappers walked through the perimeter within sight of the 6th Convalescent Center. They planted all their charges, fired AK-47s at the patients running from the burning buildings, then got out of the base without a casualty. The patients here are Army men who have received minor wounds and have been sent to recuperate in safe Cam Ranh Bay. The people responsible for the security of the hospital are unavailable for comment at the moment. There's little doubt, however, that in the future there probably will be fewer remarks about Cam Ranh Bay being the safest base in South Vietnam. That kind of complacency costs lives.
Despite stepped-up security, the 6th Convalescent suffered a second attack just 2 weeks later.
The attack occurred late at night, at a time when no one really expected it. Most of the American servicemen who were at the hospital were still awake, listening to the radio and watching television. How did it happen?
Well, we were all sitting over here having a good time listening to records when we noticed that the sampans were just moving out in a line. Then we noticed there was a big ship, one of the biggest. It came out there, and we can see the motor rounds were coming over there by the wards. Right where the craft shop is, wards right over there. And one of the motor rounds hit the ward, injuring a lot of people. And then we started to panic.
I was hit out in the field by RPG once before. That's the reason I'm here in the hospital. And, you know, it's just like a flashback to me. The first, I heard the booms, and all I saw was fire coming out and just scrap spread, you know, out like that. And I just know, you know what really had happened. Then after I saw the guys laying around, and there's one guy that got shot in the back, and I picked him up and drug him over there to the bunker where the medics were. Then some lieutenants ran out here and grabbed the other guys and pulled them on in.
Shrapnel hit up on the walls here and went in through the lockers we have in here, and it hit all in here, and well, you can see the holes and stuff like this in the wall here and stuff.
So most of the wounds were from shrapnel?
Right. Here's the shrapnel I've got picked up on the inside of the barracks here, and as you can see, it's different colors here, and it really is hot when it hits you, and it really burn a hole, I'll tell you that, and makes a pretty good size hole too.
Up until a few weeks ago, this base was considered one of the most secure in all of South Vietnam. Now it seems the enemy is attempting to prove just the opposite.